Come on in. Come on in. We're gonna begin the show that we deserve. Finally live on LinkedIn as well. And there goes the message on WhatsApp. And then we begin. 48th episode. Done. So I'm live on YouTube and live on LinkedIn. I'm sorry I'm late. If you can hear me, please tell me. If you can't, please tell me so that we could fix things, right? So that we could fix things. So just let me know if there's any problem with the video. I'm already super late, so I'll just check myself. I'm already super late. I'm audible on YouTube. Come on in. I'm all audible on LinkedIn. So I will begin. Sorry folks for being late. I was trying to understand something. Bum 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 bum. Hello everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We're working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, well, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue our journey of reading between the lines things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go! Oh, but before we go, we've got to follow a tradition, right? We've got to follow the sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a cup or mug or glass or tank, a chalice or stein, a canteen jug or flask or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. Today I'm having lemon tea. And here we go. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Let's do it again. Wonderful. Sublime. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what the simultaneous sip says? It says that you are not alone. It says that we are in this together. And that's such a nice thing to say. Moving on, with that out of the way, speaking of nice things to say, iPhone 17 parts are landing in India's Foxconn factory for production. Audio is good. Mr. Chandrasekhar, Mr. Abhas Dua, thank you so much. So, iPhone 17 parts are getting imported from China, and a lot of parts, the glass, the rear cameras, the screen, so on and so forth, they are getting delivered to the Indian plant. Now, Indian plant usually imports the parts off and makes 14 and 16 for the domestic market. But with iPhone 17, it's basically looking at the export market as well, quite a lot of it. Now, Apple's iPhone exports are huge, especially from India. So India has been rising as an export power as far as smartphones is considered. Viewers of Thinker's Frequency would know we talked about this. We began this journey in 2017, the smartphone and manufacturing play. And that has really gotten a lot of fillip, especially with Apple. So if you think about smartphone Indian market, it's been static at 150 million phones for a couple of years now. It's not growing. 10 billion. Samsung makes $10 billion in sales from the Indian smartphone market. 10 billion is 80,000 crores, 82,000 crores. 10 billion is what the BYK guys make. The whole Oppo, Vivo, Reno, all of the Chinese players, Xiaomi and so on and so forth. They make 10 billion, and then 50,000 crores is what Apple makes as far as Apple phones is considered, sales is considered, right? But Apple makes a lot of phones for exports from India. Now, this was in disarray because China essentially had an exodus of its executives from the Indian Foxconn plant. They didn't want the Indian industry to grow so much as it was growing. So they essentially called their 200 executives from India, which led to some serious drawback of the entire sentiment. However, it's back, so it's good. Apple is essentially looking at this. Global launch of new model likely in September, and they are looking at cover glass, display, rear camera sourced from China. So, bulk components, however, have been sourced for the iPhone 14 and 16 model, which are to be sold in India, right, in this festive season. Moving on, uh, we have parked 1.3 thousand crores for the rare earth magnet scheme. Now, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would know that China blocked the rare earth magnet supply, which led to a serious problem as far as the whole electric vehicle manufacturing place considered. And that continued for so long that the problem spilled over to the speaker manufacturing industry as well, the consumer electronics, the heavy electronics, and so on and so forth. So, this basically made people understand that they cannot rely on Chinese supply of rare earth magnets. So India has started incentivizing indigenous production of rare earth magnets, due to which 1.3 thousand crores have been parked on this scheme. So they're gonna launch this scheme very soon, and hopefully with that scheme, India will become sort of self-sufficient as far as the rare earth magnet play is considered. Now, what's very important to realize is that India's rare earth magnet import is very small in quantum, in terms of money. However, it's not small in terms of its impact. So 306 crores worth shipment was blocked, right? That's not a lot of money. However, uh, without that component, you couldn't make the car. Without that component, you couldn't do anything. So, small things lead to big effects, right? As far as this place considered. So, now India is basically looking at its own manufacturing. E-commerce and logistics players are going to hire a lot of uh, temporary workers for delivery operations, because they expect some sort of boost as far as sales and demand is considered during the festive season. So they expect the demand to pick up, due to which uh, gig workers demand will go up to 11 million. That's 1.1 crore gig workers working. All of these people would be basically delivery executives, operations executives, and so on and so forth. Now, this is 30-35% higher from the usual. The uptick is like 30-35% higher, and after the peak season, they'll be off. While this may sound like a good news, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would know that delivery executives, the jobs of delivery executives, are not really, uh, you know, great. As Mr. Piyush Goyal also mentioned in one of his speeches, that we are basically exploiting the unemployed labor with the distraction of a delivery boy job. Now, the concept behind that is that once you get a delivery boy job and you work for it, it's very good that you get the work, right? You're being able to pay bills. However, there's no growth aspect as far as the delivery boy job is considered. In fact, you just keep slogging, and the law of diminishing returns takes it away. So if you start as a delivery executive at, let's say, 18, which is the legal age, and even if you do it for 10 years, you'll not be making more money. You'll be making the same amount of money, right? So now that is a problem. So this news has to be looked at in that perspective, not to dampen anybody's spirit, this is good, that these companies are offering people the employment. However, uh, this has to be taken with that kind of a notion as well. So festive season usually leads to this kind of demand. So every festive season, the demand for temp workers goes up, and then it plateaus or goes down. Speaking of plateaus, uh, HUL has plateaued for a long time. HUL is Hindustan Unilever. Hindustan Unilever, if you look at the stock, it's down, it's not up. Uh, for a couple of years, it's not been up. Uh, Now, the reason why HUL stock has not been up has been said that India's consumption story has been under decline, right? Because there has been a serious decay, or let's say downfall, or let's say slowdown in the Indian consumption story. And HUL, a company like HUL, Hindustan Unilever, is essentially a proxy of Indian consumption story, because they sell soaps, they sell all sorts of things, right? What kind of brands? Detergents, soaps. HUL sells a lot of things. Let's check HUL's brands. HUL's brands, right? Dove, Lifebuoy, Close Up, Lux, uh, Cornetto. Yeah, they have ice creams, Magnum, and so on and so forth. Pierce soap. So HUL sells daily essentials, which are essentially proxy of the Indian consumption story. So until now, what we had been looking at was HUL is not growing, or HUL is not being able to sell, because it's a problem with the Indian economy itself, right? That was the notion. However, that notion hasn't been flying well for a couple of years, while some companies have been able to show some growth. HUL has not been able to do that. So there's been a change of leadership. Now Miss Nair, who has led the beauty unit of HUL, lives in London. She's taken over as, sorry, not HUL's beauty. She led the Unilever's beauty. Unilever is a Dutch company. Now it's the biggest FMCG company in the world. Unilever's India unit is Hindustan Unilever's Limited. So now you get the idea. Now she is coming to India as the head of HUL. That's supposed to be a very powerful thing, because she comes from a beauty background. She's been leading the beauty unit. Now, beauty unit is said to be a very high margin and a high growth play. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember we talked about how beauty imports had been rising from, let's say, 70 million from 3 years ago to 100 million now, right? Or maybe they had doubled. Maybe it was 150 million. So I'm not sure of the figure, but they had almost doubled in just last 4 or 5 years. So maybe she brings that beauty experience and leads HUL to higher margin categories, and leads to better growth. So that's the hope, that's the prayer. Let's see how that works out. Moving on. Uh, Flipkart is giving a $50 million ESOP buyback to its employees. Now, how many of you know about ESOP buyback as a thing? Do you know about employee stock options? That's called ESOPs. Now, ESOPs is something that companies do to engage their people, to give them an opportunity to buy the stock essentially at a lesser price, and then watch it grow, and then vest that stock when it has grown. And when the company buys back your stock, you make a lot of money. Let's say when the company was worth 1 crore, you get 1%, right? So you get 1 lakh rupees. But then the company's valuation grows to 100 crores. And by the time you have just like 0.2% or 0.3%, because your share gets diluted, you get like 0.2% of 100 crores is huge, right? It's 20 lakhs. So basically 1 lakh to 20 lakh, and all of that you get over and above your salary. So that's ESOP. Flipkart has given 550 million ESOP buyback. 7,500 employees set to benefit. 50 million is essentially 400 crores. So 400 crores of ESOP buyback. With this, Flipkart has also set its valuation at $35 billion. $35 billion. Now, Flipkart's revenue in India are about $10 billion. The wholesale and retail unit put together, it's basically $10 billion, and it's getting valued at $35 billion. That means the multiple that it's getting is 3x, 3.5x. Now, why did I mention this? Why did I tell you the multiple of Flipkart and its valuation? Can you take a guess? Can you take a guess? It's because Meesho is also looking at an IPO, right? Now, this could be used as a comparable for Meesho as far as valuation is considered. Let's say if Flipkart is getting a multiple of 3.3x, you can judge if Meesho is getting valued fairly, or is it overvalued or undervalued, or so on and so forth, or it's adequately valued. So Flipkart is also going to go IPO anytime soon. They are planning an IPO next year or something. So that's going to be one of the biggest IPOs that has ever happened as far as the Indian bourses are considered. The last biggest IPO of the Indian tech industry, which one was it? Can you guess? Can anybody write in comments? That was Paytm, $20 billion, right? That didn't work out well. But yeah, Flipkart is in a much better position as Paytm as compared to Paytm. So, moving on. PSB's home loan order books are dethroning private banks. At the same time, HFCs, Housing Finance Corporation companies, are also not being able to grow themselves. So basically, PSBs are taking over the home loan spree, which is great, great for PSBs, and their share is essentially pretty. It's taking a pretty big climb, right? Moving on. India is set to expedite Israeli decoy deliveries to strengthen Rafales. Now, how many of you know about decoy deliveries? So I used to watch this, Dogfight. There used to be a channel called Dogfight, a show called Dogfight at History Channel as a kid. It was a pretty nice show. So they used to talk a lot about airplane fights. So dogfight is the term used for airplane fights, and now India wants expedited delivery of Israeli decoys for Rafales. So what decoys do? What is basically, you tie something from the plane, and it sort of gives the radar signal. So it mimics the signal which the plane is giving. Okay. Now what it does, it makes the radar receivers, let's say the anti-aircraft missiles or whoever, to see that there are two planes and this plane is somewhere else, right? So it basically mimics the plane's radar signals, and it's attached by the plane through a fiber optic cable, a very long fiber optic cable. Okay. So what it does is that if a missile hits, it hits this particular thing, not the real plane. If it hits, it hits. If it doesn't hit, the plane returns with it to its origin plane after the mission. So essentially, it gives the plane a lifeline from a missile attack, or let's say an anti-aircraft system. So that India needs that, because that's obvious, right? Why would India need that? Rafale is a very expensive plane, and when a plane and a pilot, pilots are more expensive than planes, of course. So if something happens to the plane and the pilot, it's a big loss. So you've got to minimize that loss, and a way to minimize that loss is by creating decoys and parallel redundancies and so on and so forth. So that's the move. However, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would know that it wouldn't matter in a few years about the jet planes, Why? Why do you think it wouldn't matter where the jet plane industry goes? Can anybody guess? Because of drones. As viewers of Thinkers Frequency would know, drone warfare is essentially the future of all warfare. And we had a very nice discussion on it where we talked about drone warfare essentially being like nuclear warfare but with no limiting factor. So let's say if you made a nuclear bomb, there's no incentive for you to make another nuclear bomb which is 10% better or 20% better. So the effectiveness of nuclear bomb is capped, okay? And since it's such a big deterrent tool, it cannot be used. So it's basically something that cannot be used as far as the modern warfare is considered. So even if you have a nuclear warhead, it's basically a deterrent, not a tool, right? Because if it goes nuclear, everything ends, and everybody knows that. However, drone is not a deterrent. Drone is a tool, and a drone can keep getting better. You can always keep improving the drone. And right now, the drones are becoming more and more intelligent, more and more lethal, more and more effective, everything. So drone technology is like nuclear technology, but without a limiting factor. So whoever has more drones, whoever has better drones, they just win. You don't need to fight a war anymore. You just count the number of drones and the quality of those drones, and you can just declare the winner. And that's about it. So that was proved to be the case as far as Azerbaijan and Armenian war. That's that proved to be the case with Israel, and that proved to be the case with now Russia. So Russia and China are leading as far as drone technology is considered throughout the world. They're ahead of even in America. So India naturally is looking at catching up in that, but now since that's a few years away, you need the fighter pilots and you need these jets to work, which explains the expedited delivery. Hope that explanation was nice. Moving on. Uh, moving on. Boom, boom, boom. There's a lot of political chit chat which we don't discuss because it's very, very complicated. Right now, a lot of political chit chat is happening, which is frankly super, super complicated. One of them is SIR. You know about SIR now? Bihar elections are going through this revision of the voter rolls. So to weed out illegal voters, this is happening. This is causing a lot of problems because a lot of cases are happening which says that if you reject somebody's voter roll right now, they wouldn't have adequate time to contest it. And if they can't contest that decision that this rejection is wrong, it's a violation of the voting right. And the counter to that is we can try to not do that as much as possible. But would you count illegal votes then? Would you let illegal voting happen? So these are the two sides of the sword. And this is a very, very complicated discussion which is happening. So people are trying to not count illegal votes. However, making that happen has proved to be very, very difficult as far as play is considered. So that is on. That's something to be discussed, right? Can't ignore it because it has real business values. Because what happens in those elections will determine what happens in the state, which will determine what happens in the country. Speaking of Bihar, they are really trying to do a lot of. They're trying to attract some renewable energy. The state is trying to attract some renewable energy plants and investments. So they're giving companies the benefit of full reimbursement of the state GST, SGST, 100% reimbursement of state GST, and a lot of other, uh, you know, perks like easy land acquisition, some tax rebate, and so on and so forth. All for making it seem easier to start working in Bihar for the energy units because that's very important. Bihar needs a lot of energy, and currently, of course, that's not the case, right? Despite Bihar being such a natural uh, mineral rich state. But Bihar and Jharkhand got split, Jharkhand got all the mines. But still, it shouldn't be happening like that, which is slightly troublesome. But this is what it is. Speaking of something which is not that troublesome, or maybe it is, aging India needs to invest some 72,000 crores, that's almost $8 billion dollars, to in elder care solutions. Elder care. Now, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would know that we've talked about this in detail about elder care. Why do we talk about elder care? Do you know about that? Why do we think about elder care? I'm giving you a second. Oh, I heard you. You're right. You're right. Because India is aging now, right? India's fertility rate came down from 2.1 to 1.9%, which means the newer generations will be smaller. The population won't replenish itself. To replenish the population, you need to have a fertility rate of more than 2.1, right? Now it's gone 1.9, which means fewer babies are gonna get born. If fewer babies get born, the aging population will keep rising because good average life expectancy should rise, but the average age will also rise because babies bring down the average age, right? So with aging population and with the quantum of aging population also growing, what we'll need is a serious healthcare, elder care facility system. Now, a lot of early movers did a lot of work. So, Ashiana Housing was one of the few very early movers in this play. Then uh, there was a family business. I read this story in Inheritors, the book, which was a great book. Uh, they have Amora. Amora was one. So a lot of big business houses are building elder care houses and so on and so forth to take on this opportunity. However, now it's becoming real. Now those projects which started 10 years ago, they've proved to be very, very far sighted. Now it's coming real, and India needs to learn from countries. Now, which country can India learn from as far as elder care management is considered? What do you think is the best example for India? Right? Japan. Japan is the best example, right? Aged population actually, not growing, and has been managing it very well. So there goes Japan. Uh, Moving on, sales volume of used cars likely to grow 8 to 10% in FY26. Now, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would know why this is happening. This is just a news item for everybody else, but for viewers of Thinkers Frequency, it's something deeper than that, right? We know why this is happening. Why are used cars sales growing up 10% in FY26 when new car sales are not growing, right? Why do you think that is happening? You know it. When new car sales don't happen, due to whatever reason, due to slowing consumption, due to affordability issues, due to whatever, used car market grows up, right? And that's exactly what's happening. So Indian car market has not been for 2 years, has shown some stagnation. That means the need doesn't go anywhere, right? It's just about cheaper alternatives for the same need. And that's why the used car market is growing like 10%. Smaller base, yes, smaller base, sure. However, 10% is huge. Now, I recently met a startup founder, a very accomplished startup founder. They've raised a lot of money, $7 million or something. What they do is they have an AI solution to help the used car vendors to sell better. So they have a car, you can using their app, click its picture, you can run around the car, and they will give you that 360 degree tour kind of an image, a 3D model, which will help you sell better. So if you have a better cataloging as a used car dealer, your time to sell becomes lesser. Time to sell, that is turnaround time for a vehicle to sell, goes down. That means your profitability goes up. So with that solution, they've been able to make decent, real, solid headways in the US market. And now they're going to look at launching in the Indian market. So kudos to them. I guess they are well timed, right? By the way, luxury car segments has slowed down a little, which is surprising because in India, the cars which have been selling are premium cars, or let's say expensive cars, SUVs, have been growing. Now, this report says that luxury cars have not sold in the first half of this particular year. However, in the same report, it says Mercedes hasn't sold much, but BMW has sold 10%. So, is it because luxury cars sell very less in India, like 20,000 or such cars, right? So I'll tell you the number of cars. 22,000 luxury cars were sold in the first 6 months of this year. So in the entire year, we sell basically just 45,000 cars. Now, not a lot of players in that market. But if BMW could have sold and Mercedes couldn't have sold, is it a brand problem or is it a segment problem? That's always a very good question to ask, right? Is HUL's decline, or is HUL's problem as far as quantum or profitability is considered an HUL problem or an Indian economy problem? That's always a very, very good question to ask. Is it the market problem or is it the player problem? So in this small market, let's say 22,000 cars, it's hard to say, right? If it's a very big market, you can say that it's a very big market, very distributed players. You can judge all players and you find out that on an average it's going down. That means it's a market problem. However, if it's a small market and Mercedes is declining but BMW is giving like a 10% growth, maybe it's not a market problem, right? Maybe the headline is wrong. So that's what we do here, right? That's what we do at Thinkers Frequency. We analyze, we think beyond the line, read between the lines, right? Moving on, biosimilars to usher new growth, leading $1 trillion drug exports by 2030. So biosimilars, biologics, and generics. Do viewers of Thinkers Frequency know about this? We haven't discussed this as yet. So generic drugs are essentially exact copies of brand name drugs. Okay. Now that's generic drug. Biosimilars are similar drugs but not exact copies using living cells. That's called biosimilars, biologics, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not a biotechnologist. However, my brother is, and I've heard a lot about these things from him. And, I like to read. So, the generic market is okay. However, biosimilars is where the greenfield lies right now. Is supposed to exceed biosimilar market potential to exceed $60 billion by 2030, right? Global generic market is supposed to be growing at like 5%, but the biosimilar market might just be growing a little faster. Drug exports growing 5 to 8%. So that's what's happening in the drug market. Biosimilars are looking at the next phase of growth as far as pharma industry is considered. Right. Speaking of pharma industry, Wockhardt has exited the generics business. Wockhardt was a big company, US company. It's gone it's filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy support, and it's exited the generics play. Now it's gonna look at innovative drug discovery to fuel growth and to provide stable income. Because problem with generic is that it's a volume play. It's not a margin play. Generic drugs are by definition cheaper. So there's name brand drug, right? A company which did all the research and so on and so forth. So they launched that drug. And then there's lesser priced generic drug, which is the exact copy of that particular drug, right? So it's not a margin game as far as generic is considered. So Wockhardt struggled with that and now says we won't be doing generic. We're going to go for drug discovery and lead on to that play. Now, that's an interesting play because viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember how China has been leading the play as far as drug discovery is considered, right? China used to have very little market as far as drug discovery is considered, like just a few years ago. But now it has 30% of the new discovery market share. 30%. 30%, right? US is leading at 48%, but its share has been declining. India is obviously nowhere. Indian pharma is essentially a high volume, low innovation, generic manufacturing play. But that's changing. Let's see. Let's see if that changes. Moving on, Mr. Hiremat, Shubhoday Hiremat says, I admire your consistency. Keep inspiring. Thank you. I hope it's valuable to you. It's very nice, right? It's like we discussed in a earlier episode of Thinker's Frequency on how this is a way to not be lonely. As I say, what the simultaneous sip is that you're not alone. We are in this together. So this is such a nice way of connecting with people, right? And we connect through comments, we connect through knowledge, we connect through analysis. This is such a nice way of doing it. Now, I write articles and a lot of my articles go viral, but that's not real connection, right? I posted something and it just went viral, and there's no to and fro like that. This feels very human, organic, and very nice. Moving on, something very interesting is happening as far as Tesla is considered. Tesla is setting up its Mumbai showroom, and its Delhi showroom will also be here. Tesla couldn't set up a manufacturing play in India because of China. You remember that? So Mr. Musk was supposed to come to India and almost finalize the deal of setting up a manufacturing setup. However, then suddenly his trip was cancelled in India and his trip was instead directed to China. Coincidence? Of course not. Of course not. So China essentially stole Mr. Musk from India, which is so sad. However, whatever happened, he's bound to enter Indian market anyway. You know why? Why does Tesla need the Indian market now? Why do you think Tesla really needs the Indian market now? Even though Indian market is very small, not growing itself, it's a declining market, or let's say slowed market. Why does Tesla need it? Because Tesla is really fighting an uphill battle as far as Europe is considered and China is considered. Chinese EVs are really on a killing spree for both European players and American players, and Tesla is one of the casualties, at least for now, at least till robotaxis isn't a business, right? So Tesla really needs to find a footing, and maybe it sells a few cars in India, and that sort of gives the company some new directions. Moving on, Switzerland has ratified India EFTA trade pact. So a lot of FTAs were to be signed, right? So Switzerland has essentially gone ahead. Switzerland and some Norway and a few countries there, which is called Scandinavia. Scandinavia is Norway, Sweden, Denmark, but you can't Swiss. Now they're gonna invest like $100 billion in India in the next 15 years. $100 billion in the next 15 years. That's essentially some $7-8 billion a year. And with those $7-8 billion a year, they want to create like 10 to 15 lakh jobs in India. So they're investing in the Indian market, and they want to be seeing themselves as one of the key players in the India growth story, because we are the only major economy growing at 6.5%, largest major economy with this kind of growth rate, right? Hard to miss, but a good deal, good deal. Thanks to Mr. Piyush Goyal. Great job. Moving on, Niti Aayog is planning to boost heritage sites, much needed. But you know what? The problem with heritage sites is that Indians just litter all over it. Indians shit all over it, shit all over it, like plastic bottles, uh, polythene wrappers and some chips packets and so on and so forth. And it just spoils everything. Like beautiful parks, you construct those parks, you maintain those parks, and beautiful parks, and you have like biscuit wrappers and so on and so forth. Now here's an idea I discussed with somebody in the non-profit industry. Okay, just tell me if this idea makes sense to you. I said, why don't we have a CSR initiative to spread awareness on the clean initiative, like the Swachh Bharat, okay? However, how we do that is through speakerphones installed in these places, in these public places. And what those speakerphones do is essentially talk about the need to not do this, like severe deterrent to bad behavior. They talk about please don't throw stuff like this, and throwing this, basically public shaming in the form of audio reinforcement, right? So when you enter somewhere, like you go to a railway station, right, and you have reminders on what to do and what not to do, something like that, at a much lesser intensity, at a much lesser frequency, but existing, so that people are reminded to not do this. And like clear deterrent statements, right? That do not do this. Not that create a better, not positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, that don't do this. And then if that's a CSR initiative, it could be funded by a corporate. And that corporate could be having a, message like this message has been sponsored by Aditya Birla Group, or let's say, you know. So that could be a strategy for that company to reinforce its commitment to the India growth story by supporting the Swachh Bharat mission. What do you think? That way, we might just be able to, guide Indians on not to litter, at least on the heritage sites, at least in the public spaces which are supposed to be beautiful by design. That was the thought that we discussed. How does it sound to you? Let me know your thoughts and comments. Moving on, RBI's 7-day VRRR. VR is basically variable reverse repo rate. Variable rate reverse repo has seen a lackluster, subscription. About VRRR, reverse rate repo. Do you know what it does? So what it does is it sucks out the excess liquidity from the system. So it basically says that you can park your money with RBI and RBI is gonna pay for it, right? So what it does because liquidity, if it gets into excess liquidity, it's a problem. Excess liquidity is obviously a problem, and liquidity crunch is also a problem. Why is liquidity crunch a problem? Because money doesn't move and so on and so forth. It becomes difficult to lend. Why is liquidity excess a problem? Because idle capital, inflation, and so on and so forth, it becomes difficult to manage that. So RBI has different moves to target this particular scene, right? One of those is VRRR, that's reverse rate repo. What it does is it sucks out the money from banks and says, we're going to give you money, park your money with us. But that doesn't always work, because banks have other sources to park their money in, right? So they have WACR and so on and so forth. Now that is the interbank lending play. So they use that sometimes. And this time, since they were trying to, their repo, basically this particular move was looking at 2.5 lakh crores. It just got like 1.5 lakh crore auctions from bank. So at the system level right now, RBI is having a liquidity of 3.15 lakh crore. Okay, 3.15 lakh crore. That's slightly above the comfort range of 2.5 lakh crore as far as ideal liquidity is considered. So this is very complicated. Not many people understand this, and I'm not sure if how well versed with are you with the entire scene, but VRR auction essentially sucks out excess liquidity Right now it got undersubscribed. And at the same time, RBI has held a buyback of GSECs. GSECs is basically government securities, right? Now, what does that do? When you buy back government securities, you essentially give liquidity to the system. So you had government securities out in the market and you buy them in exchange for cash, right? So it provides liquidity. Now, how is it different? How is VRRR, which is sucking liquidity out of the system, and GSEC buyback different? GSEC buyback is a mid-term, medium-term phenomena. VRRR is a very daily, very short-term thing. So you've got to manage liquidity both at short-term and at long-term. And now if you read these two headlines together, you'll be puzzled, like RBI 7-day VRRR undersubscribed and RBI to hold buyback auctions for 3 GSECs. What's happening? This is what's happening. VRRR is short-term liquidity management. GSEC is mid-term liquidity management. And there are a lot of interesting concepts which are slightly slightly complicated, right? If you look at weighted average call rate, what is weighted average call rate? Or let's say, what is TREPS, tri-party repo? What is liquidity adjustment facility? What are all of these things? These are very complicated things, slightly complicated, but this is essentially, philosophically, fundamentally managing liquidity. So liquidity adjustment facility is basically managing WACR, that's weighted average call rate, the interbank money liquidity, management, and then the repo, and then tri-party repo, and so on and so forth. So if you need a very detailed explanation on it, I can go deep into it. But for now, you get the drift, right? They're basically wanting to manage liquidity. It should not be extremely liquid. Surplus liquidity is a problem, and downward liquidity is a problem, and both have to be managed. So it needs to be very precise all the time. Moving on, Religare to raise 1,500 crores, Burmans to pump in 50%. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency, remember we talked about the Religare Burman fiasco. Religare is an insurance company. It was founded by Mohans, I guess. Then Mohans went out because of some scandal. Then Ms. Rashmi Saluja was the CEO of Religare. Now Dabur wanted to take on Burmans wanted to take over Religare. Burmans are the founders of Dabur. Dabur family is Burman family. Now they wanted to buy Religare, but Miss Rashmi Saluja didn't want it because she wanted to be at the head. But this led to a boardroom showdown, boardroom battle between Burmans and Miss Rashmi Saluja. Now Miss Rashmi Saluja said that Burmans have some sort of governance issues and so on. It's not illegal that they're being able to buy and so on and so forth. Burmans started saying that there are governance issues as far as Rashmi Saluja is considered, because she's gotten bad, ESOP awards, unfair compensation, and so on and so forth. Now this led to a bitter boardroom showdown between these two parties. Eventually Burmans prevailed and they were able to buy Religare. Now they essentially are promoters of Religare, and Miss Rashmi Saluja is out. And we've talked about this a lot. It's a pretty interesting play. Moving on, High Court stays 1140 crore tax demand on Oyo. So there was a case going against Oyo where they had got a serious tax demand. Essentially, it was a so-called angel tax thing, where if you, let's say, get an investment over and above your valuation, that investment is treated as an income and then you have to pay tax on it. So that was the contention. It wasn't a fair case because valuation fluctuations happened with Oyo went down and so on and so forth, the valuation. So this particular tax itself, the law itself has has been looking on its way out. So Oyo has gotten respite. Oyo is being you should expect a lot of good news coming around Oyo now, because their PR game will be on steroids. So they'll just be, every day you'll read something good happening around Oyo's business, that this business is clicking, that business is clicking, and all of that is to successfully have an IPO. Because if they are not being able to do an IPO, that company is essentially ruined, right? And Mr. Ritesh Agrawal will be out. So a lot of PR, and I'm not saying that PR is majorly fake news. However, you should know what you're reading. So moving on, quality check stricter bids rules for highway projects. Well, that is obvious. So highway projects have been running as far as build operate transfer model is considered. They are tweaking that. Build operate transfer is that a private company and public company, they invest some money, then the private company builds it, operates it, and transfers it to the government. And then now there's another model called ham, which is hybrid annuity model, where basically, what happens with ham is that huh, uh, the government essentially pays the private player, you know annuity in an annuity way through the toll collections and so on. So I'll tell you the revised definition of highways and so on, and so just give me a second. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so this is exactly what happens. The government essentially pools some money along with the private player, and then annuity payments are paid as far as the private investment is considered. So this is basically sharing of capital and so on and so forth. NHAI, by the way, is looking at bidding out 124 projects worth 3.45 lakh crores in FY26. So that's huge. That's huge. And that is basically under the hybrid annuity model. So under HAM, the government provides 40% of the project cost as construction support, while the 60% is funded by private developer, who is then repaid by the government through annuity payment over the project's operation period. So that's HAM. And why this is happening is because quality has been a raging issue as far as Indian roads and highway construction is considered. So this is a new problem, because earlier the problem was slow construction, very slow construction of roads, which we solved. So we used to be making like 11 kilometers per day, and now that is almost triple. We are on fire as far as road development is considered, all thanks to Mr. Nitin Gadkari. However, with that pace, uh, we are seeing some problems as far as quality of roads is considered, which is basically making people relook at the entire model of involving private sector and making sure that they adhere to the quality standards and so on and so forth. So that's going on. By the way, Trump administration to fire 1,300 in pursuit of slim government. 1,300 people is not making a dent, but this is basically a posturing move to say that we are still serious about the Doge mission, right? Making slimmer government, Javier Milei, Afoira, and so on and so forth. POTUS threatens 35% tariff on Canada. Now, why is Mr. Trump raising tariffs on Canada? Canadian and American relationship has been very good for decades, but now it's being strained. And one of the reasons of that strain is that fentanyl is being supplied through Canadian borders to America. Fentanyl is a drug, and it's a very nasty, bad drug. Essentially, it kills people, it wastes their life, and so on and so forth. About 35,000 people died in America due to fentanyl overdose in just last year, or maybe even shorter period than that. Fentanyl is supplied by China through Mexican borders and through Canadian borders. From both sides, China is basically ruining American youth by fentanyl supplies. So, to stop that, Team Trump is essentially dealing with China, but also dealing with Canada and Mexico to make sure that this doesn't happen from their borders. What do you think about this move? So, that's that. Bitcoin might rise to a rally. says experts. That's okay. That's fine. And finally, Prada team is to visit Maharashtra next week. May roll out Kolhapuri collection. So Prada is gonna tie up with Indian local artisanal artisans for a Kolhapuri collection. So viewers of Thinkers Frequency, remember that we had this discussion on the Prada and Kolhapuri chappal controversy. So Prada, during a Milan fashion festival, they basically they just stole the Kolhapuri chappal design totally, right? And they just stole it, didn't even give credit. Forget about giving money, which led to a real social media backlash. That hey, how can you steal something like that? You're in the creative industry. Due to which they contacted, they were approached by Maharashtra and the associations and so on and so forth. Now they're gonna go next week and talk about tying up with the local artisans for not just Kolhapuri chappal but also other Maharashtrian, cultural fashion accessories and so on. So that's going on. That's what social media backlash can do to companies. Everything is not bad with social media, right? Anyway, with that, we come to the end of the 48th episode of Thinkers Frequency, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis, which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. I hope you have a beautiful day at work, and also hope you have a beautiful day professionally. I'll see you tomorrow, same place, same time, hopefully. Until then, auf Wiedersehen. Bye bye.